Hello, Adam here from Relume, and in this video today, I'm going to show you how to create this animated mockup scroll interaction on Webflow, which can be used for product demos. It can also be used to showcase a web design portfolio, among other use cases. So this video is going to be split into two parts. The first part, we will be building the Lolli animation inside of After Effects. You do not need to be an expert at After Effects. I'm no expert. We're going to be using a template to do this, so it's quite straightforward. And then once we've built the Lolli animation, we're going to go over to Webflow, build the structure of the site and also the interaction. So let's jump in. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, I am no expert at After Effects, and so I did not create this animated mockup. I used a template built by this company called LS Graphics. Now, I have not been paid to promote this company at all. I genuinely think these guys are awesome. The quality of their work's really great and I use them a lot. So I have gone and I have downloaded their Pixel Book animation. Not their looped one, but their Pixel Book animation file, which comes with 4 different animations. And for the purpose of this animated mockup, I'm going to be using their second one. First thing that I did was download this file. And then once I've downloaded this file, I opened up this file on my desktop, and the very first thing that you want to do is go to the file called change this. And so this essentially is the static image that appears inside of the laptop. So as you can see here, you'll see the change this image appear here. Now, because this static image will appear and then switch to a video in Webflow, what I've done is I've wanted to make a loading state so that it feels like the program is loading up as the laptop flips. So I have gone ahead and I've matched the dimensions of that image, and I will now export as a PNG, and I will save it or replace it. And now I have an updated screen. So the next thing that I'll do now is I'll go back and I will go ahead and I'll open the After Effects file. Great, so now I've opened the After Effects file and I'll just click space to see that what the animation looks like. It's all looking good. The next thing that I'll do is I'll click the, I don't know what this button is, but essentially it's this button that looks called Toggle Transparency Grid, and I'll click that, and what that will do is just make the background transparent, right? And I'm just gonna test that my screen that I've added in is appearing. Cool. All right, so the next thing that I'll do, I'll go to File, and I will click Export, and I'll just add to Render Queue. Okay, now I'll go to Render Queue and I'll click Best Settings. I'll just drag this up here, and what I'll do is I'll probably want to create a frame rate of 20, just because I don't need to have the smoothest transitions between frames, and so I think 20 frames will allow me to reduce the entire file size quite significantly without reducing the quality of the scroll interaction. So this is the number that I've experimented with for this particular animation mockup. So yeah, that's why I've gone with that. Okay, so once I have done that, I press OK, and then I go and click Lossless. Okay, Lossless is where I will be changing a few things. I'll start by making this a PNG sequence. So what this is going to do, is going to export this mockup animation into PNGs, so that this will enable us to actually create a Lolli animation. The reason why I want to do PNG is because I want the background to be transparent. This does mean that the file size is slightly larger, but I have experimented with ways of reducing the file size, and I still want to keep that transparent background if I do decide to add any other interactions behind it, or if I do decide to actually change the background. The next thing that I'll do is I'll change the channels to RGB plus alpha, which will ensure that there will be a transparent background. The next thing that I'll do is I'll want to resize the width of the PNG. Again, I'm trying to reduce the file size here, so this is one way of doing it. And then I will press OK. I will then click to the output name, and I'm going to call this animated lockup, and I'll call this one screenshot. Cool. Doesn't really matter, just sort of just keeps things super organized. Okay, and once I've done that, I will go ahead and I will render. All right, so what I will do now is open up the folder called animated mockup. So this is where it has been exported, and there you'll see my PNG sequence. The next thing that I will do is compress all these PNGs to reduce the file size. So I'm always trying to optimize the file size because these animated mockups can be quite large, and I don't want it to be the detriment of my website's speed. So the next thing that I'll do is I will open up Google, and I will type in tinypng.com. And this is my go-to tool for compression. And I'll click that, and I'll open up the animated mockup, and I'll just drag those in. And I'll wait till they've all been compressed, and then I'll go to the bottom here and I'll download. And so I have the zip file here now, and you'll see that it's now 6.3 megabytes in total, as opposed to the 15 megabytes that it was prior. So this is going to help big time. All right, the next thing that I'll do is I'll go back to After Effects, and I'll just close this, and then I'll open up After Effects again, and I will create a new file this time. I'll just go to new project. I don't think I need to name it at this point, but then what I'll do is I'll go and I'll get my PNGs, and I will drag them into here. Once they've been imported, I will drag this to the After Effects timeline. And so the following modal will appear. Essentially, you need to decide the still duration. So I've made it 1 second, so make sure it's 1 second. And also make sure that sequence layers are selected and that they do not overlap. So once that is all set, I'll press OK. All right, so the next thing that I'll do, which is sort of unique to this project, is that I want to decrease the width of this animation, because if you go to the actual animated mockup, you'll notice that the Lolli animation isn't wide, and this ensures that on mobile devices, it scales quite well. So it's close to the edges. If it was wider, then this would appear very tiny on mobile. So we just want to make sure that it is as narrow as possible. So what I'll do is I'll click region of interest, and I'm essentially cropping this animation here, and then I'll test that it doesn't actually come out of the frame. Okay, that's good. What you'll also notice that is when it's fully opened, there is more space at the bottom. So I just want to make sure that it's centered on the page. So I will adjust the frame to look like this. And then I'll go over to composition, and I'll go crop comp to region of interest. And what that will do is we'll crop it. All right, cool. So now it's time to export as Lolli. Firstly, you'll need to go to Window, and you'll need to go to Extensions, and you'll need to make sure that you have the Body Moving plugin installed. Okay, I'm going to show you where to find the Body Moving plugin. All right, so what you want to do is you go to Google and type in Lolli Airbnb, and go to this link that has Lolli Airbnb, and scroll down to the bottom where it says Install Body Moving, and click Body Moving. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of this GitHub page, there are 4 options as to how to download and install Body Moving. So there are the 4 options. I think I've done option 3, but option 2 seems pretty straightforward, and so does option 1. So go check that out, download it, install it, and once you have done that, we can go back to the After Effects. Once I have installed Body Moving, it will be in my extensions. I will click and open Body Moving. once I have done that, I'll need to go to settings and I'll want to go to assets and I want to click copy original assets and to include it in the JSON. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I have gone ahead and I've compressed the images myself. So I just want to make sure that the Lolli animation is using my compressed assets. So I'll then go ahead and I'll press save and I will need to now name this JSON. So it's going to, essentially what body movement does is it converts After Effects animation into JSON, and then Lolli reads that JSON, renders the animation on the web. So I'm going to call this animated Mockup1 and I'm going to click save, and then I'm going to click select it and I'm going to render it. So this will take a couple of minutes to do. Alright, so the render is finished. That is all good to go. Now let's go to my files, go back here, and cool, we have the JSON file. It is 8.5 megabytes. It's sort of big, it could be bigger, it could be smaller. There are ways that we can further compress this by reducing the frame rate, by reducing the width of the JSON, and also not using PNGs, but selecting your background and using a JPEG. So that is some ways that we can reduce that file size. But 8.4 megabytes is doable. It's not the worst, so we are going to go ahead and we're going to use this. Alright, so it's now time to build on Webflow, and I'm inside of the Webflow designer and I've set up my page ready to be built. I will be using the ClientFirst style system, which is a framework for naming classes and building inside of Webflow, created by the team at FinSuite. I would highly recommend using ClientFirst. If you haven't heard about ClientFirst, go check out FinSuite's documentation on that. It's just a game changer in terms of improving the way you build Webflow, keeping your projects organized, improving your productivity and speed, and also adhering to SEO and accessibility best practices. So that's what I'll be using. If you are familiar with ClientFirst, great. I'm sure you'll be able to understand how I've approached the build of this. For those that aren't, again, go check out ClientFirst. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build the first section. I have become quite lazy at building sections now. I don't build from scratch now that I use the Relume library. So I'm just going to paste in the first section, going to remove this and call this Mockup1. I'm also going to change the container from container small to container large. So these classes have been built in to the ClientFirst system. So yeah, that explains that. Okay, I'm going to rename this section to section Mockup1, and inside of the padding vertical div, I'm going to add a div and I'm going to call that Mockup1 Component. And so this Mockup1 Component will be like the parent div wrapper of everything that goes inside of the interaction and animation that you see here. So that will include the laptop Lolli animation, the video, and also these texts that scroll through. So with that in mind, I will make this a Flexbox vertical centered because I want all the content inside of it to be centered. I'll make the height 600 viewport height. Why that? Well, I want there to be enough scroll to play out the Lolli interaction, because the Lolli interaction is going to be based on scroll, and also so that the video has time to play out as well. I will make the position of this relative so that if I do want to tweak or position any elements inside of that, I can use things like absolute and have more manipulation around the positioning. Okay, the next thing that I'll create, the next div that I'll create is a div called Mockup1 Animation Content. And so this will have the animation inside of the content. And so what I'll want to do is I want to make it 100 viewport height. I'll also want to make it Flexbox and make it all centered. And I also want to make the position sticky. The reason why I want to make the position sticky is that when the laptop does hit the top of the screen, I want it to stay in place. So that is how we've achieved the laptop sort of being in the center of the screen as the interaction plays through. So this is essential for making it sticky. And for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'm going to add another div, and I'm going to call this div Mockup1 animation. Sorry, let's call this Lolli animation. Let's differentiate a little bit to the other class names. Lolli animation wrapper, and I'm going to make sure that that's 100% width, and it is 100 viewport height, so to match the parent. And so this is where the Lolli is going to be added in. I also just want to make sure that it is centered inside of that Lolli, and I'll also make it the position relative just in case we need to adjust anything inside of that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to add in my Lolli animation. And so that is good. Let's preview. All right, so it's there. It's quite large. So what I will want to do is I want to click the Mockup1 animation content wrapper, and I want to set a max width on this just so I can control the width of the Lolli animation, and more importantly, so I have some real estate around so that you can actually visually see the text. Or if you want to add anything around it, you can, like this call out over here. And so I'm going to make this 56.25 rems, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to preview the Lolli so I can see that, yeah, that's a good size. All right, cool. So the next thing that I will do is create inside of the Lolli animation wrapper. I want to create the video animation. So the video animation is the video that overlays on top of this. And so I'll create a div for that, which will be the videos wrapper. So I'll call this video wrapper. And for now, I will just leave that as is. And the next thing that I'll do is I'll add in a background video. So I'll add in background video. And so I've pre-recorded this background video to be added to the site. It's called product demo video. I've used QuickTime to just screen record myself clicking through the Relume library. So it's very easy to do. You can use QuickTime and right click QuickTime. You will see new screen recording, and you can go ahead and just record your screen. So I'll add that into the Webflow, and I'll load that up. Cool, so it has been uploaded. I'll go back to my video wrapper, and I'll make sure that the position is absolute. And I'll also make sure that now that I have the video in there, I'm gonna name this class Mockup1 video, and I'm gonna make that also absolute. And I'm going to also make this video 100% width and 100% height of the video wrapper. Okay, so let's click around and see where that video wrapper has gone. Okay, so it's at the bottom here, and ideally it needs to be overlaid on top of the computer. So here we are. I'm going to click absolute full, but I don't want the video wrapper to be full. Just done this to get it into position. I actually just want it to be auto on all sides. And yeah, I am brought back to the bottom. So I need to figure out what is happening here. And I think I know what is happening here. I need Flexbox to be centered. Okay, now the video is in a better position. Let me see. Need that to be justified. Cool, all right, so the video is in a good position. Now I have my video here, that's all good to go. I then now need to adjust the width of the wrapper, and I'm going to add padding 50% here. And the reason why I'm doing 50% here and not the height is that this technique enables you to keep the aspect ratio of the video. So if you actually look behind the laptop, you'll see that the video is keeping its aspect ratio. So this is a little technique for images and videos. If you want to keep aspect ratio, create an image or add an image, but then also create a div which acts as the image wrapper. Make sure it's relative, position relative or absolute, and then make sure the child wrapper, the child element, which will be the image, is set to absolute, and then edit the padding. So the aspect ratio here is half the height of the width. So if I wanted to make it 100% of the height and width, it would be a square. If I wanted to make it, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, it'd be 75%, etc. So I'm just going to tweak these values until I get the right amount of height and width. And full disclosure, I already know what that is. So I think it's 43 and, no, I think it's actually 47 and 83. And so there you go. I have found the perfect aspect ratio for this video. And now it's time to see if it fits perfectly with the Lolli animation. So I'm actually gonna name this class Lolli animation because I forgot to do that. And now you can't see the Lolli animation. It's a bit annoying inside of Webflow. You cannot see Lolli animations very easily unless you preview them. But I do want to make sure that the Lolli animation and the video are in line. So what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of a hack. I'll go over to the section and I'll go scroll into view, and I'll create a temporary animation here just so I can visibly see the Lolli file. And so I'll click the Lolli file and I will click Lolli and I'll set this to 99%. Okay, so now I can actually see the laptop and I can line the video up with the laptop. Okay, so the next thing that I'll do is, well, the video is appearing behind the laptop, so I'll need to increase the Z index to bring it forward. So I have made the Z index 3. I think 3 will be enough to do that. And as you can see, the video sits quite well horizontally, but it could probably do with some padding here to fit vertically better as well. And now that is perfect. So let's just go ahead and we'll preview that. Cool. All right, so next thing that I'll do is I'll actually just remove this as that temporary interaction, and we'll start building out the interaction. What I will do is I'll add a div inside of the Mockup component, and I'll call this div Mockup1 triggers. And so this will be essentially a div that will be used for the scroll interactions. And so what I want to do is I want to make that absolute, and I don't want this to be visible, so I'm just going to keep it to the left, and I'm going to make the height 100%. And then inside of this div, I'm going to create another div called Mockup1 trigger 1. Okay, and so this div will be the trigger for the scroll interaction to play through. So I'm going to make it 30% of the height. So if you recall, in the beginning we made the entire component 600 viewport height, and so it's going to be 30% of 600 viewport height. That is how much we're going to need to allow the scroll interaction to play through. Okay, so I'll click the Mockup1 trigger 1, and I'll go over to element trigger, and I'll do a while scrolling into view interaction where I will create a Lolli animation, and I will click the Lolli animation, which is here, and I will go to Lolli. I'll play from the start and then do 100%. So essentially it's playing from the start to the end, and there you see it. It is playing as I scroll. So let's preview. We have the laptop opening, staying in position, and then you have the video being here. Okay, so the next thing that I'll do is I'll create another div, which I'll use as the div that triggers the video from entering in. So I'm going to call this div Mockup1 IX trigger 2, and I'm going to make that 70% in height. And I'm going to go to the interactions, and I'm going to go scroll into view, start animation, and I'm going to call this demo video fade in, and I'm going to click the video, and I'm going to make it opacity 0 to begin with, set initial state. I'm going to duplicate this and then make this 100%. And I'm going to make an ease in, and I'm going to make it slightly quicker to 3 seconds. Cool. And now I need to create a fade out for when it fades out of view. So I'll do that, duplicate that interaction, call it fade out, delete this, change this wrapper to this element to 0%, press save. Cool, so now I've got a fade in and a fade out. Let's see how that works with the interaction. Let's preview it. Okay, so it opens the laptop. Cool, video plays. Awesome. Now I still got a bit of scroll left. The reason why is because I want people to actually watch the video as they scroll, but also it's perfect time to add in some text that like sits behind it like this. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's go back to the navigator, and what we want to do is we want to open up the Mockup1 component, and we're going to create a div called Mockup1 background text wrapper. All right, so for this we are going to set 100. We're going to set 100 viewport height margin so that it does take some time before it actually comes through. I'm also going to change the Flexbox to vertical, and I'm going to center the text, and I'm going to make the sizing expand out as well. Okay, so there you can see for the remainder of the scroll we have the wrapper for all the background text. So now I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to call this next div Mockup1 background text 1. Let's call it that. Okay, sweet. Now with that, I'm going to make it 100% width and make it 100 viewport height. And I'm also going to make the, I'm going to add some text to it in the background, right? All right, so what's going on here? We don't have, essentially we don't have a full width occurring here. So wonder why that is. Well, I feel like this needs to expand to 100%. Cool, all right, so that works better. I'm going to call this text Mockup background text. It's not the greatest class name, but whatever. And then I'm going to make this like 10 rams because I want this to be big. And I'm going to call this, just use this for now, right? And also I am going to duplicate this now so that there's text on the left here. But for this, I'm going to call this text background 2, and I'm going to make sure that the text is aligned to the right? And then I'm going to add in another one. Cool. All right, now let's preview what that looks like. All right, sweet. So there you have it. You have the same effect. And that is essentially how to create an animated mockup from After Effects into Webflow. I hope this was super helpful and that you learned a lot from it. All right guys, so I hope you have learned a bit about how to build an animation mockup, scroll interaction inside of Webflow, and also I guess how you can structure that using ClientFirst. If you like this video, please leave a comment, a like, and subscribe. And if you have any ideas on other content that you'd like to see from Relume, please leave that in the comments. We are always looking for ways that we can help the community. And so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time.